Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
You are now listening to Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting Indigenous peoples across the globe. This May edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central, South America, Africa, Asia, and beyond. Starting news from the United Nations. The 24th session of the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues commenced on April 21, 2025, with Aluki Kotiark assuming the presidency. She is recognized for her leadership in advocating for the rights of Indigenous peoples, both in Canada and internationally. Kotiark takes on this significant role during a time that demands concrete actions to advance the collective rights of Indigenous communities. The event featured a poignant performance by Indigenous youth who played a violin piece dedicated to women and ancestors. The president emphasized this performance as a spiritual symbol and connections to history, stating, "It is a way to bring the soul of our ancestors into this house of the United Nations, a place of a dialogue, multilateralism, and shared responsibilities." In USA, hundreds representing approximately 20 Native American tribes convened at the Nisqually Reservation on May 5th for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons Awareness Day. The gathering, organized by the Nisqually Tribal Health and Wellness Center, aimed to raise awareness about the disproportionately high rates of violence against Native Americans. Attendees wore red and used red face paint to symbolize the silenced voices within their communities. Latiba Plumes of the center highlighted the lack of widespread attention these cases often receive compared to those of other ethnicities. The annual demonstration gained significant momentum after the 2023 murder of 21-year-old Rendeli Perez, a community member. The Department of Justice reports Native American women face murder rates 10 times the national average, while the exact number of missing and murdered Indigenous individuals nationwide remains unknown. Estimates reach into the thousands. Washington state is believed to have a particularly high number of cases, with 134 non-missing Native Americans as of April 2023, according to the Associated Press. In Canada, the Standing Buffalo Dakota First Nation has initiated a lawsuit against the Government of Canada, seeking restitution for what it describes as centuries of systemic discrimination. Chief Roger Redmond stated that this legal action aims to address the ongoing impacts of residential schools, the Indian Act, and laws that have marginalized Indigenous peoples. The First Nations amended a statement of claim filed in federal court on April 1, 2025, asserts that Canada has failed to reconcile its sovereignty and rights of the Dakota people. This is despite their long history in Canada and their allegiance to the Crown. This lawsuit follows a 2024 apology from Canada, which acknowledged the incorrect labeling of the community as refugees. While the apology aimed to rebuild trust, Chief Redmond argues that discriminatory practices continue, particularly in relation to consultations on capital projects on their traditional lands. The First Nation is insisting on establishing its own consultation framework and plans to challenge any projects that have been approved without adequate engagement. The claim does not specify any monetary award. News from Africa. Starting from Kenya. In Kenya's Narok County, 900 Maasai teenagers have completed a rare warrior initiation camp known as Inkipata, held once every 10 or 15 years. Over a month, the boys endured traditional rites, sleeping outdoors, fasting and refraining from bathing to learn leadership, respect, and cultural values. The camp, held in a village of Olay Musiay, aimed to prepare them as future leaders amid challenges like climate change and land loss. The ceremony culminated in a communal feast and the planting of trees symbolizing growth and unity. Women played a vital role by constructing shelters and supporting the boys throughout the camp. This event underscores the Maasai community's resilience in preserving their heritage for future generations. Staying in Kenya, Kenya's Amboseli National Park has outpaced the Masai Mara in visitor growth, according to recent tourism data. While Amboseli saw a 70% increase in visitors, the Masai Mara experienced a 60% rise. Both parks are renowned for their unique wildlife experiences and stunning landscapes. The surge in Amboseli's popularity is attributed to its breathtaking views of Mount Kilimanjaro and the diverse wildlife that inhabits the park. In contrast, the Masai Mara continues to attract visitors with its iconic wild beast migration and rich cultural heritage. This trend reflects a broader diversification in Kenya's tourism offerings, with travelers seeking varied experiences across the country's national parks. In Algeria, recent inflammatory remarks by self-proclaimed academic Mohamed Belghiti have ignited controversy by claiming the Amazigh identity is a fabrication of France and Israel. His statements, made on Sky News Arabia, have been widely condemned as a denial of the indigenous Berber identity and a threat to national unity. This rhetoric aligns with the broader pattern of marginalization, including the suppression of Tamazigh's language rights and the silencing of Tamazigh cultural expression. Despite constitutional recognition of Tamazigh as official language, implementation remains limited and activists continue to face repression. Observers warn that such decisive narrative risks undermining Algeria's cultural diversity and social cohesion. News from Asia, starting from Japan. After over a century in its anatomical museum, the University of Edinburgh has repatriated the skulls of 3 indigenous Ainu individuals to their community in Japan. A formal ceremony in Edinburgh on April 30th marked the return, attended by Professor Sir Peter Mathiasson, principal of the university, and Mr. Okawa Masaru, executive director of Ainu Association of Hokkaido. The Ainu and indigenous groups from Hokkaido experienced marginalization and the removal of remains for research in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Dr. Neil Gordon Munro donated these remains to the university in 1913. Following a traditional ceremony at the university, the remains will be interred at the memorial sites in the Opopoe National Ainu Museum and Park per Japanese government guidelines. This repatriation underscores the university's ongoing efforts to address its colonial legacy and build relationships with communities worldwide. In Malaysia, a Human Rights Watch report released on May 4th reveals that Malaysia's Sarawak state has failed to protect the indigenous Ivan community from logging by ZT, a company within the Xinjiang group. The 54-page report titled Facing the Bulldozers, Iban Indigenous Resistance to the Timber Industry in Sarawak, Malaysia, details how ZT logged ancestral land without consent and sought to displace the community of Rumaha Jeffrey. Human Rights Watch found ZT's actions violated local laws and the Malaysian timber certification schemes. Instead of holding the company accountable, the Sarawak government allegedly threatened protesters with arrest and the community with eviction. The report urges Malaysia to enact stronger laws protecting indigenous rights and calls on major importers of Sarawak wood, including the EU, US, and Japan, to enforce their timber trade regulations. The organization highlights the need for supply chain transparency and accountability to prevent further rights abuses and deforestations linked to the timber industry. Now, news from the Americas, starting from Colombia. Around 15,000 members of Colombia's 8 main indigenous organizations gathered in the capital Bogota for a national indigenous minga to defend their territorial rights. With songs, chants, and ceremonial staff, the demonstrators expressed their unwavering spirit in fighting for the well-being of indigenous peoples. In a statement issued days before the demonstration, the National Indigenous Organization of Colombia condemned acts of intimidation and stigmatization directed at indigenous members, guards, and leaders from the National Indigenous Organization of Cauca River Valley, who had arrived earlier to participate in the protest in Bogota. In Guatemala, international organizations, civil society groups, and representatives from various countries have condemned the criminalization of former indigenous authorities from the 48th cantons of Totonicapán. They are calling for their release, emphasizing that their detention occurs in what several organizations describe as a systematic attack against those who defended democracy in 2023. A statement signed by the group, such as Cecil Walla Cívicas and Article 19, argues that the charges of terrorism and unlawful association illustrate the continued use of criminalization as a tool of political pressure. The statement also highlights that ancestral indigenous authorities have been pillars in defending collective rights and strengthening the rule of law, and demands an immediate end to these actions. In Brazil, on April 25, 2025, thousands of indigenous people marched in Brazil's capital, Brasilia, to demand that the government officially recognize the land that they have inhabited for centuries and protest these territories from criminal activities such as illegal mining. Carrying banners with messages like "The future is indigenous," the marchers made their way to Brasilia's Three Powers Plaza, which is home to the Congress, the Supreme Court, and the presidential palace of Planalto. Indigenous leaders entered the palace to speak with President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, while others shouted towards the building, "Our rights are not negotiable." In Ecuador, the Waurani nationality of Ecuador has denounced an alleged attempt by the US-based foundation and its director to initiate contact with indigenous peoples living in voluntary isolations within Yasuni National Park. Waurani nationality of Ecuador expressed concern in a public statement regarding recent publications by the foundation, "Come to the Rainforest," led by American citizen Karen Duffy. These publications describe efforts to establish peaceful contact with the Taromenane people through interactions and resource exchange. The Waurani, the largest indigenous groups in Yasuni, emphasized that such actions violate their rights of voluntary isolated peoples. In Peru, Mariluz Kanakiri Murayari, a leader of Kucama people in the Peruvian Amazon and the president of Kucama Indigenous Women's Federations, Waina Kana Kamatahura Kana, has been awarded the 2025 Goldman Environmental Prize, often referred to as a Green Nobel. This award is the most prestigious recognition for environmental activism worldwide. In March 2024, Mariluz and the women of Wainakana Federation achieved a historic legal victory. For the first time in Peru's history, a river was recognized as having legal rights. The court declared that the state had violated these rights, ordered an end to oil spills, demanded the development of a protection plan for the entire river basin, and acknowledged indigenous peoples, especially Kurama women, as the defenders and representative of the river. In Panama, the ongoing migration crisis in the Darien Gap one of the most biodiverse rainforests in the world, has left significant damage to the territory of Imbera community. This includes piles of garbage, fuel contamination, human waste, and increasing presence of organized crimes. The river, which was once safe for swimming and fishing, now causes rashes on children's skin and produces fish that emits a gasoline odor. Community of Villa Caleta, like many others, is facing not only an environmental emergency but also a direct threat to their health and survival. Panamanian authorities estimate that cleaning up the 2,500 tons of waste will cost around $12 million. The US government is being held partly responsible for facilitating the migration crisis as thousands of migrants embark on this perilous journey towards the US border. Meanwhile, the White House remains silent on the matter. In Mexico, Marco Antonio Sustegui, a historic community leader and land defender, was murdered in the municipality of Cacahautepec in the state of Guerrero. He played a central role in the decade-long resistance against the imposition of the La Parota Dam, part of the border 22-year struggle by the local communities against the dispossession of the Papagayo River. His murder sparked widespread outrage and criticism, especially since the project has continued despite government promises to address the concerns of the affected communities. La Parota is a mega project promoted by the Federal Electricity Commission and the private companies that has sought to impose itself on local communities for 22 years. It threatens the dispossession of land and water in the Papagayo and Omitlan River across 5 municipalities. The project would flood approximately 17,000 hectares, forcibly displacing around 20,000 people from 21 villages and impacting more than 70,000 residents in the region. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, and X.